A Navy SEAL? Honestly, Lily, the stories you children invent. Your mother works from home on a computer. Let's stick to reality, shall we? The words from Ms. Albright dripped with a cloying, condescending sweetness that failed to mask the sharp edge of her disbelief. The classroom, a petri dish of sixth-grade social dynamics, erupted in a wave of snickers and muffled laughter. Lily Morgan felt her face burn, a hot tide of shame rising from her chest to the roots of her hair. She stared down at her desk, at the crayon drawing of a woman in camouflage holding a rifle, a crude but heartfelt tribute to the hero she knew her mother to be. The teacher's judgment was a physical weight, pressing down on her, isolating her in a sea of giggling peers. Lily's mother, Sarah, had told her that most people wouldn't understand her job, that it was okay to just say she was a government consultant, but today was Heroes Day, and Lily wanted the world to know her mother was a true hero, not just some office worker. Ms. Albright continued her lecture on honesty, her voice a droning instrument of public humiliation. Lily didn't hear the words, only the tone of absolute certainty, the smug satisfaction of an adult correcting a child's fanciful lie. She said nothing. She didn't cry. She just sat perfectly still, her posture straight, her hands folded on her desk, a miniature echo of the silent discipline she had learned from the very woman being dismissed. But in the hushed corridors of the school's administrative wing, the principal, Mr. Davies, was about to place a phone call that would shatter the teacher's comfortable reality. He had seen the quiet dignity in Lily's file, the sparse emergency contact information that listed only a single, heavily redacted Department of Defense line. He had a feeling, a deep-seated unease that Ms. Albright's casual arrogance was a misstep of monumental proportions. If you believe that true strength doesn't need to announce itself, type "quiet professional" in the comments below. The phone call to Sarah Morgan was brief and professional. Mr. Davies explained the situation, his tone apologetic, conveying a sense of urgency that went beyond a simple classroom dispute. On the other end of the line, there was no outrage, no defensive shouting, no emotional outburst. There was only a pause, a pocket of absolute silence that seemed to stretch for an eternity, pregnant with unspoken weight. Then, a calm, level voice, devoid of inflection, spoke just 3 words. "I'll be there." The line went dead. Sarah Morgan placed her phone down on the polished surface of her workbench, her movements economical and precise. She was not in a corporate home office, surrounded by spreadsheets and coffee mugs. She was in a soundproofed workshop, a clean, sterile environment filled with meticulously organized tools and disassembled components of advanced communication hardware. Her hands, which Ms. Albright had imagined tapping away at a keyboard, were scarred and steady, hands that could field strip a rifle in complete darkness or suture a wound under pressure. She rose from her stool, her compact frame moving with a fluid grace that belied an immense, coiled strength. Her face, framed by simple brown hair pulled back in a tight bun, was a mask of placid neutrality. But her eyes, a pale, piercing blue, held a different story. They were the eyes of a person who had looked into the abyss and had not flinched, eyes that assessed, calculated, and saw through cheap facades. She made one other call, her words just as clipped and technical. "Vance. Situation at the school. Lily. Protocol Gamma." An acknowledgement came back instantly. "On our way." There was no need for further explanation. Protocol Gamma wasn't for threats, it was for validation. It was for moments when the quiet world of shadows had to intersect with the loud, oblivious world of daylight, a protocol designed to correct a fundamental injustice with overwhelming, undeniable proof. She changed from her work clothes into a simple pair of jeans and a plain gray Henley, an outfit designed to be invisible, to blend in. But as she walked out to her unassuming truck, she knew that invisibility was no longer the mission. The mission was clarity. The arrival was not loud, but it was deafening. It began not with a roar of engines, but with a subtle shift in the atmosphere of the sleepy suburban school. 3 black, immaculate SUVs, the kind that soak up light and betray no hint of their occupants, pulled into the visitor parking lot in perfect, synchronized formation. They moved with the eerie silence of predators, their tires barely whispering on the asphalt. They didn't park, they established a perimeter. Doors opened in unison, and from them emerged a dozen men. They were not in uniform. They wore the same kind of civilian attire as Sarah: jeans, boots, functional jackets, a uniform of deliberate anonymity. Yet, they moved with a shared, ingrained discipline that was more commanding than any dress uniform could ever be. Their posture was identical, relaxed but alert, hands empty and visible, eyes constantly scanning, assessing, missing nothing. They were of different ages and builds, but they shared a common aura of deep, unshakable competence. They were the living embodiment of quiet professionalism. Sarah Morgan emerged from her own truck, and the men fell into a loose but impenetrable diamond formation around her, their movements fluid and instinctive, a silent testament to countless hours of training together. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their very presence was a statement. As they approached the school's entrance, the crossing guard froze, her bright orange vest suddenly seeming foolish and insignificant. Students pressing their faces against classroom windows fell silent, their playground chatter dying in their throats. The school secretary looked up from her computer, her welcoming smile faltering as she took in the procession. It wasn't an army. It was something far more potent. It was a surgical instrument, a team of men who operated at the highest echelons of national security, and they had come to a sixth-grade classroom to stand behind one of their own. Ms. Albright was summoned to the principal's office, a self-satisfied smirk playing on her lips. She assumed the parent had arrived, likely flustered and defensive, ready to offer excuses for her daughter's pathological lying. She walked down the hallway with a confident stride, prepared to deliver a firm lecture on parental responsibility and the importance of truthfulness. But as she rounded the corner and saw the assembly of silent figures standing outside Mr. Davies' office, her step faltered. Her smirk dissolved, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then a growing knot of anxiety. These were not the irate or apologetic parents she was used to dealing with. These were something else. The men stood like statues, their gazes neutral but penetrating. They made no move to acknowledge her, yet she felt as if she were being scanned, weighed, and found wanting. In the center of them stood a woman of average height and build, her expression unreadable. This had to be Lily's mother. Ms. Albright's arrogance, a brittle shield forged in the petty squabbles of the PDA, began to crack. She pushed open the office door, a nervous energy now thrumming beneath her skin. Inside, Mr. Davies sat behind his desk, his face pale and beaded with sweat. Lily was there, standing beside her mother, her small hand held firmly in Sarah's. The silence in the room was absolute, a heavy blanket that smothered all other sound. Ms. Albright, Mr. Davies began, his voice strained. This is Mrs. Morgan. We need to discuss what happened in your class today. The teacher summoned a last vestige of her authority. Yes, I'm glad she's here. Lily made some very imaginative claims about her mother being a Navy SEAL. I was simply trying to steer her back to reality. The words, which had sounded so reasonable in the classroom, now sounded hollow and foolish in the crushing silence of the office. Sarah Morgan's expression did not change. She simply looked at the teacher, her calm gaze a far more powerful indictment than any angry retort. One of the men who had been waiting in the hall stepped forward, entering the office and closing the door softly behind him. He was older than the others, with silver hair cut short and a face etched with the lines of command. He wore a simple blazer, but he carried himself with an air of authority that was unmistakable. He nodded respectfully to Sarah before turning his attention to the teacher and the principal. Mr. Davies, Ms. Albright, he said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that commanded immediate attention. My name is Colonel James Vance. I am Master Chief Petty Officer Morgan's commanding officer. The titles, delivered with such casual finality, hung in the air. Master Chief, commanding officer. Ms. Albright's mind struggled to process the information. It didn't make sense. This unassuming woman, a Master Chief? Colonel Vance continued, his tone remaining level, but gaining an edge of cold steel. I understand there has been some confusion regarding Master Chief Morgan's profession. Let me provide some clarity. He didn't consult a file or a phone. He spoke from a memory forged in years of shared service and sacrifice. You dismissed her daughter's claim that she was a Navy SEAL. Ms. Albright, you were mistaken. Master Chief Morgan is not just a SEAL. She was one of the first women to ever pass BUD/S selection and be integrated into a Naval Special Warfare Development Group. Her operational record is one of the most distinguished in the entire history of SOCOM. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle into the suffocating silence. The teacher's face had gone from confused to ashen. The name of the elite unit, spoken so plainly, was a thunderclap in the small office. Colonel Vance's gaze was fixed on Ms. Albright, and it was utterly unforgiving. You stand in a classroom and teach children about heroes, about honesty, about respect. Yet you publicly shamed the daughter of a woman who has sacrificed more for your freedom than you can possibly comprehend. Master Chief Morgan has over 200 credited combat missions. She holds the Navy Cross, 2 Silver Stars, and 4 Bronze Stars with Valor. The reason she works from home on a computer, as you so dismissively put it, is because she is one of the world's foremost experts in encrypted communications and signals intelligence, a skill she uses to keep teams like the one standing outside this door alive on battlefields you only see in movies. Each credential was a hammer blow, dismantling the teacher's smug worldview piece by piece. Her file is classified above top secret. Her very existence is a state secret to our nation's enemies. The only reason I am standing here, breaking a dozen protocols, is because she never, ever defends her own honor. But she will always defend her child's. He took a small step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying more menace than any shout. You owe this child an apology. And you owe her mother your silence and your respect. Is that understood? Ms. Albright could only nod, her throat too tight to form words. She looked from the colonel's granite face to Sarah Morgan's placid one, and for the first time, she saw her not as a quiet suburban mother, but as a figure of immense and terrifying stature. The principal, Mr. Davies, finally found his voice. Master Chief, he stammered, rising from his chair. On behalf of this school, I am so profoundly sorry. Sarah Morgan simply gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. She looked down at Lily, squeezed her hand, and said, "It's okay." Her validation didn't come from the teacher or the principal. It came from the quiet strength within and the unwavering loyalty of the men who stood with her. The departure was as swift and silent as the arrival. Colonel Vance gave a curt nod, turned, and led his team out of the building. Sarah walked with Lily, the men once again forming their protective, unspoken diamond around them. They moved through the hallways, a river of quiet purpose parting the waves of gawking students and staff. No one spoke. The message had been delivered with devastating precision. The SUVs started without a sound and pulled away, disappearing into the fabric of the afternoon as if they had never been there at all. But they left behind a legend. The story of what happened in the principal's office spread through the school like wildfire, whispered in the library, texted under desks, recounted with breathless awe on the playground. It was a modern-day fable, passed from student to student, then from teacher to teacher, and finally from parent to parent on community forums that evening. The narrative shifted and grew with each telling. The dozen operators became 100. The colonel's words became a thunderous speech. But the core truth remained unchanged. Ms. Albright had made a terrible assumption, and in doing so, had insulted a national hero in front of her own child. The teacher's authority was shattered. The respect she had once commanded through fear and sarcasm evaporated, replaced by a mixture of pity and contempt. The students in her class now looked at her differently, their eyes holding a new, critical awareness. They looked at Lily Morgan differently, too. The quiet girl at the back of the class was no longer just Lily. She was the daughter of a hero, a living link to a world of courage and silent sacrifice they had never known existed. The shame that had been forced upon her was gone, replaced by a quiet pride that radiated from her like a light. Ms. Albright was placed on administrative leave the following day. The school district, facing a torrent of calls from outraged parents, many of them from the nearby military base, moved quickly to contain the fallout. An official, district-wide apology was issued to the Morgan family, though Sarah never publicly acknowledged it. Her mission was complete. The teacher eventually returned, a humbled and diminished figure. She delivered a stilted, tearful apology to her class and specifically to Lily, who accepted it with the same quiet grace her mother had shown in the principal's office. The event became a catalyst for change within the school. Mr. Davies, deeply affected by the incident, spearheaded the creation of a new curriculum module focused on understanding and respecting the contributions of military families. He instituted an annual Veterans Appreciation Week, a far more meaningful event than the superficial Heroes Day had ever been. A small, discreet plaque was mounted in the school's main foyer, dedicated to the quiet professionals who serve in silence. It mentioned no names, but everyone knew who it was for. The story became part of the school's institutional memory, a cautionary tale told to new teachers during orientation, a lesson in the danger of judging a book by its cover. It was the story of the day Master Chief Morgan came to school, a legend that reminded everyone that the most profound strength is often the most silent, and that true heroes don't need applause. They only need to be believed by those they love. Lily no longer had to defend her mother's honor. The entire community now stood guard over it. A year later, during the school's inaugural Veterans Appreciation Week, Lily Morgan stood at the podium in the auditorium. She was no longer the shy, quiet girl who shrank from attention. She stood tall, her voice clear and steady as she spoke about her mother. She didn't recount the dramatic confrontation in the principal's office. She didn't need to. Instead, she spoke of the small things, the way her mom could tie any knot, the calm she projected during thunderstorms, the quiet integrity that guided her every action. She spoke of a legacy not of medals and missions, but of character. My mom taught me that you don't have to be the loudest person in the room to be the strongest, Lily said, her eyes finding her mother in the audience. Sarah sat with Colonel Vance and a few of the other team members, all in their anonymous civilian clothes, a small island of calm in a sea of proud parents. She offered her daughter a small, private smile, a universe of love and pride conveyed in a single, subtle gesture. The incident with Ms. Albright had been a painful crucible, but from it, a new strength had been forged in both mother and daughter. It had reinforced the core tenet of Sarah's world, that actions, not words, are the final measure of a person. Competence is its own credential. Respect is not demanded. It is earned through quiet, relentless excellence. The world is full of noise, of boasts and bluster, of people who build their identities on shallow foundations of opinion and prejudice. But beneath that noise, there are others, the quiet professionals, the ones who do the work, who bear the weight, who ask for nothing in return. They are the bedrock on which society stands, the unseen guardians, the silent architects of peace and security. Their legacy is not etched on statues or written in headlines. It is woven into the very fabric of the freedom that allows a teacher to misjudge, a child to dream, and a community to learn. It is a living legacy, carried forward in the quiet confidence of a young girl who now understood the true meaning of strength, and in the transformed culture of a school that had learned a profound lesson in humility. The true measure of a hero is not the story they tell, but the world they make possible for others to live in. It's the silent promise kept, the unseen watch held, the quiet competence that stands ready in the shadows, waiting for the moment it is needed. That day, it was needed not on a foreign battlefield, but in a sixth-grade classroom, to fight not an armed enemy, but the insidious poison of ignorance and assumption. It was a mission as critical as any other, for it was a fight to defend the truth for a child. And like every mission she had ever undertaken, Master Chief Sarah Morgan had achieved her objective with surgical precision and overwhelming, undeniable force. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud arrogance, and where silent strength defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Tales.